Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time to a world that is serene on the surface but deeply, bizarrely brutal underneath. We're heading to Japan's Heian period, a time of exquisite poetry, elegant court culture, and, as we'll soon discover, some of the most punishing beauty standards ever conceived. Imagine a beauty so idealized that it required you to erase every natural feature you had, trading your own face for a toxic, artificial mask. Honestly, if you were dropped into this world, the social pressure alone might get you before the lead poisoning does. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support truly means the world. Then while you're at it, I'd love to see where you're all listening from tonight. Let me know your city and the time in the comments below. It's always a little magical to think of us all tuning in from different corners of the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air around you changes first. It becomes heavy, damp, and smells of wet cedarwood, incense, and the faint, earthy scent of distant rain. You find yourself standing on a wide, paved avenue in the heart of Heian, the imperial capital of peace and tranquility, which you might know today as Kyoto. The year is somewhere in the 10th century. The city is a marvel of planning, a perfect grid of streets and avenues modeled after the great Tang capital of Chang'an in China. It's a vast, sprawling city made almost entirely of wood, paper, and tile. As you look around, you don't see skyscrapers or concrete towers. Instead, you see long, low-slung wooden buildings with elegant, swooping roofs of cypress bark or ceramic tile. These are the residences of the Kuji, the court nobility, the 1% of the 1% who run this country. Their estates are hidden behind formidable white plastered walls, turning each city block into a private, secret world. The only sounds are the gentle clatter of wooden clogs on the packed earth, the distant, mournful notes of a flute practice, and the rustle of wind through bamboo groves planted within the compounds. It's quiet, almost too quiet. This is the stage upon which our story unfolds. The Heian period is famous for being one of the great cultural peaks in Japanese history. It's the era of the Tale of Genji, the world's first novel, a time when artistic sensitivity and refined taste were the most valuable currencies a person could possess. But as you walk these quiet streets, you start to notice the details. You notice the ever-present risk of fire. These beautiful wooden houses are essentially elegant tinderboxes, a fact that kept the city's inhabitants in a state of constant, low-grade anxiety. A stray spark from a kitchen or a tipped-over lantern could consume a whole district in hours. This is the first layer of unease beneath the city's tranquil facade. Your eyes are drawn to one of the grander estates. Through a half-open gate, you see not a person, but a series of screens and blinds. There's the outer wall, then a garden, then a veranda, and on that veranda, a set of bamboo blinds, or SUDR, that hang from the eaves to the floor. Behind those blinds are more screens, paper screens, silk screens, screens on stands. The life of the nobility, especially the women, is a life lived in layers, both literally and figuratively. They are meant to be sensed, not seen. Their presence is an impression, a hint of perfume on the air, the whisper of a silk sleeve glimpsed through a gap in a screen. And it's from behind one of these screens that you catch your first sign of life. You see the vibrant edge of a multi-layered sleeve, a cascade of colors, vermilion, plum, and deep violet peeking out from under the bamboo blind. It's a woman, a noble woman, but you can't see her face. You can't see her form. You can only see this tiny, tantalizing clue of her existence. This cultivated mystery is central to the Heian ideal of beauty. A woman was not meant to be obvious. Her charm was in her elusiveness, in the imagination she sparked in the minds of the men who could only ever catch glimpses of her. Historians are still debating the true nature of the relationship between the hyper-refined world of the court and the lives of the common people outside the palace walls. Did the aesthetics of the aristocracy trickle down, or were they two completely separate universes coexisting in the same city for our purposes? We are firmly within the aristocratic bubble, a world so insular and obsessed with aesthetics that it would devise an ideal of beauty that was almost impossible to achieve and utterly devastating to maintain. The woman whose sleeve you just saw is not just sitting there. She is a carefully constructed work of art, and the process of creating that art begins long before she ever drapes herself in those exquisite silks. It begins in the quiet of her chambers, in front of the mirror, with a collection of tools that look more like instruments of slow, patient self-destruction. And as the sun begins to set over Heian, casting long shadows from the elegant, swooping rooftops, you feel a sense of anticipation. You are about to go behind the screen. The bamboo blind is lifted for you, and you step across the threshold, from the relative brightness of the veranda into a world of perpetual twilight. Your eyes take a moment to adjust to the gloom. The interior of a noble woman's quarters is a labyrinth of shadows, deliberately kept dark to protect fair skin and create an atmosphere of mystery and intimacy. The air, thick with the sweet and spicy scent of kneaded incense called an aericol, clings to the heavy silk hangings and polished wooden floors. You are now in the inner sanctum, the space where the public performance of nobility is set aside, and the private, far more arduous, work begins. Here, in this dimly lit room, you are about to learn what it means to be beautiful. Forget everything you know about modern aesthetics, about highlighting your best features, about looking healthy and natural. That is not the goal here. The Heian ideal of beauty is not about enhancing reality, it is about replacing it. The ideal woman is a living work of art, a creature of such sublime and artificial perfection that she barely seems human at all. Your own face, with its unique contours, expressions, and imperfections, is not a canvas to be embellished. It is a canvas to be completely primed and painted over. Let's build this ideal woman from the ground up, so you know what you're aiming for. First, the face. The foundation of all high-end beauty is a complexion of absolute, uniform, ghostly white. It must be a perfect oval, devoid of any natural color, freckles, or blemishes. This isn't a light dusting of powder, it's an opaque mask, a layer of white pigment that smooths everything into a single, serene surface. The purpose is twofold. It signifies a life of leisure, far from the sun-darkening toil of the fields, and it creates an emotionless canvas upon which only the most subtle feelings might be imagined, never explicitly shown. Next, you must turn your attention to your mouth. When this perfect, white face smiles, what do you see? Not pearly white teeth. You see a flash of polished, jet black lacquer. This is Ohaguro, the practice of dyeing one's teeth black. To our modern eyes, it's a jarring, even unsettling, image, but in the dim, flickering candlelight of a high-end chamber, the effect was dramatically different. A wide smile with white teeth could look like a gaping, skeletal grin in the low light. Blackened teeth, however, disappeared into the shadows of the mouth, making the smile a subtle, mysterious curve of the lips against the pale skin. It was considered the height of eroticism and refinement. Now, look a little high. Your eyebrows, where are they? They are gone, completely shaved or plucked away. In their place, high up on your forehead, almost near your hairline, are two small, smudgy Y ovals drawn with charcoal ink. These are your new eyebrows, known as hikimeyu or moth-like brows. They are not meant to look natural. They are stylized symbols, transforming your face into something more akin to a doll's. A perfect, unchanging mask of placid nobility. Your natural expressions, a furrowed brow of concern, a raised brow of surprise, are effectively erased. The one feature that is allowed, and indeed encouraged, to be natural and extravagantly so, is your hair. It must be raven black, perfectly straight, and, most importantly, long, impossibly long. The ideal length was to be longer than your own body, pooling on the floor behind you as you sat. This cascade of glossy black silk was the ultimate status symbol, a testament to a woman's health, patience, and aristocratic bloodline. It was her crowning glory, the one part of her that was vibrantly, sensuously alive, in stark contrast to the static perfection of her face. Interestingly, while the face and hair were subject to these extreme and specific standards, the body itself was almost an afterthought. The fashion of the day was the Juni high toe, the 12-layer robe, a stunning but cumbersome set of layered silks that completely obscured the female form. Underneath all that fabric, the ideal figure was not slender, but pleasantly plump. A little bit of soft roundness was seen as a sign of health and fertility. This is one of the era's stranger little contradictions: a face made to look ethereal and almost sickly, paired with a body that was desirably robust. The layers of clothing turned a woman's body into a mere frame on which to display exquisite textiles. Historians are still debating the precise origins of this unique aesthetic. Was it a completely homegrown Japanese creation born from the insulated, hyper-focused court culture? Or was it a radical reinterpretation of beauty standards from Tang China? The Chinese court certainly valued a pale complexion, but the black teeth and shaved brows were a distinctly Japanese innovation. It seems the Heian nobility took a few external ideas and pushed them to their most extreme, artistic, and otherworldly conclusions. So now you see the final product, a figure gliding silently through a dim corridor, wrapped in a dozen layers of silk. Her face is a perfect, white, emotionless mask. When she speaks, you catch a glimpse of a black lacquered smile. Two charcoal smudges float high on her forehead where her eyebrows should be, and trailing behind her, a river of jet black hair flows all the way to the floor. She is beautiful. She is terrifying. She is the ideal. And starting tomorrow, in front of a polished bronze mirror, you will begin the slow, painful process of becoming her. The first rays of dawn struggle to pierce the paper screens of your chamber. Though you've been awake for some time, the real work of a Heian noblewoman begins long before any official court duties or poetic exchanges. It begins here, sitting on a silk cushion before a low, lacquered table. On this table, arrayed with the precision of a surgeon's tools, is your arsenal. This is your keshobako, your cosmetic box, and it holds everything you need to transform yourself. Let's take a moment to examine your new weapons of beauty. The most prominent item is a small, ornate ceramic jar. You lift the heavy lid. Inside is a fine, startlingly white powder. This is Oshiro eye dubbing tools, the foundation of your entire look. It feels cool and silky to the touch, almost like fine flour. For now, it seemed harmless, a simple cosmetic, but this innocent-looking powder holds a dark secret, one that will slowly reveal itself over months and years. You'll learn to mix it into a paste with water, creating a thick, paint-like substance. Applying it will not be like dusting on modern makeup. It will be like spackling a wall. Next to the jar of white powder is a small, dark, and rather unappealing-looking pot. They faint. Acrid, vinegar smell rises from it. This is your Kang Miza, or iron water, the key ingredient for Ohaguro, the tooth-blackening process. You can see small, rusty-looking iron filings settled at the bottom of the murky liquid. This isn't just a dye, it's a chemical cocktail. It's made by soaking iron scraps in a mixture of tea and dry swine vinegar, allowing it to oxidize and ferment. The resulting brew is not only foul-smelling but also corrosive. You will need to apply this concoction to your teeth every few days to maintain their lustrous, black finish. It's a ritual that requires a strong stomach and a high tolerance for discomfort. Then there's your eyebrow kit. First, a small, sharp razor. Its purpose is singular and brutal, the complete removal of your natural eyebrows. There is no room for shaping or styling, they must be utterly eradicated. Once your brow is a smooth, blank canvas, You'll turn to the next item, a stick of hardened charcoal or soot, your new eyebrow pencil. With this, you will paint on the 2 signature smudges high on your forehead. The shape and placement are critical. Too low, and you look common. Too large, and you appear clumsy. It requires a steady hand and a deep understanding of the subtle aesthetics of the court. Beside the makeup, you see the tools for your hair, and they are formidable. The most important is a long-handled wooden comb, exquisitely crafted from boxwood. It's heavy, solid, and its teeth are spaced widely apart. This is your primary detangling tool. There are other, finer combs for smoothing and styling, but this one will do the heavy lifting, battling the inevitable knots and snags in your floor-length tresses. Maintaining that river of hair is a physical, time-consuming chore, and these combs are your only allies. One particularly curious item on your table is a small, ornate porcelain pot filled with a fragrant, waxy substance. This is Encyclopedia, a type of pomade made from Japan wax. Its main purpose is to smooth down the shoulder, fly away hairs around your hairline, ensuring a perfectly neat and glossy appearance. But it has a secondary, more surprising use. A tiny dab of this wax would be mixed with the black tooth dye to help it adhere better to the enamel. Think of it as a cosmetic primer, but for a corrosive iron-based lacquer. It's a small, ingenious trick to make a painful process slightly more effective. This little pot of wax is a perfect example of the practical chemistry that underpinned these seemingly magical transformations. Finally, you see a polished bronze mirror. It's not the clear, perfect reflection you're used to. Bronze mirrors of the Heian period were dimly reflective. Their surface is easily tarnished. The image you see is hazy, distorted, and bathed in a warm, golden glow. This is the lens through which you will judge your own beauty. You will never see yourself with the sharp clarity of a modern mirror. Your reflection will always be soft, mysterious, and slightly unreal, which is, perhaps, the entire point. The goal is to become an ideal, and it's easier to believe you've achieved it when you can't see the flaws too clearly. Historians often debate the extent to which these beauty rituals were a form of personal expression versus a rigid enforcement of social norms. Was a woman choosing her eyebrow shape as a form of art, or was she simply conforming to an ironclad set of rules to ensure her and her family's social standing? The truth is likely somewhere in the middle, within the strict confines of the ideal. There were subtle variations that a discerning eye could appreciate: the precise shade of a silk robe, the unique blend of personal incense, the subtle curve of a painted brow. These were the tiny canvases for individuality in a world that demanded uniformity. So use it there, in the quiet morning light, surrounded by your tools: the white lid, the iron filings, the razor, the charcoal. It looks less like a makeup vanity and more like an alchemist's workbench. And in a way, that's exactly what it is. You are about to engage in a form of alchemy, transforming your natural, living self into something else entirely, something pale, silent, and perfect. The process will be long, and it will be uncomfortable. But, in the world of Heian Kyo, this is not just vanity. This is survival. The air in the room is still and cool. It's time. You reach for the ceramic pot of Ohaguro. Tipping a small mound of the white powder into a porcelain bowl, you slowly add water, stirring with a small brush until it forms a thick, smooth paste. The consistency is somewhere between yogurt and wall paint. There's a faint, almost metallic sweetness to its scent, a subtle warning that your senses haven't yet learned to heed. This is the moment where you begin to disappear. You dip the brush into the white paste. The first stroke is a shot. It goes on cold and wet against your skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of your own body. You start at your neck and chest, the areas that will be visible above the collar of your innermost robe. You have to paint a clear, sharp line, a tide mark, where the makeup ends and your natural skin begins. This boundary is crucial. It's a deliberate, visible sign that this is a mask, an artificial creation, not a natural complexion. Then, You move to your face. Methodically, you begin to cover every inch of your skin, your cheeks, your chin, your nose, your eyelids. You are erasing yourself, stroke by stroke. The paste is thick and opaque, and with each application, your own features begin to recede. Your freckles vanish. The natural flush in your cheeks is obliterated. The small mole by your lip is gone. You are becoming a blank canvas, a perfect, smooth, white oval. The process is slow and requires immense patience. You must apply the paste evenly, avoiding streaks. A patchy application would be a sign of carelessness, a fatal flaw in the world of courtly aesthetics. As the paste begins to dry, it tightens on your skin. It feels like a clay mask, pulling at the corners of your eyes and mouth. It restricts your ability to make expressions. A wide smile would crack the delicate surface. A deep frown would create unsightly fissures. You are being physically trained into a state of serene placidity. Your face is no longer a tool for communication, it is a static object of beauty. You learn to speak with minimal lip movement, to convey amusement with a slight twinkle in your eyes rather than a broad grin. The most challenging part of the application is around the hairline. You must paint a precise, clean edge, leaving a small, tantalizing border of natural skin showing. This creates a striking, stylized effect known as high E, or picture feet, meant to resemble the shoreline of a painted landscape. It frames the white mask, once again emphasizing its beautiful artificial. The back of the neck is also critical. You don't paint the whole thing. Instead, you leave 2 or 3 elegant, unpainted V-shapes of natural skin showing. Cold your eye as high from behind. This detail was considered incredibly alluring, a fleeting glimpse of the real woman beneath the artifice. It was a calculated imperfection in a sea of perfection. Now, let's talk about a weirdly specific detail that often gets overlooked. To achieve the most fashionable look, you wouldn't just use one shade of white. True connoisseurs of beauty might use a slightly different, more brilliant white powder, often made from ground-up seashells, as a sort of highlighter on specific points of the face, like the bridge of the nose or the forehead. This is a level of subtlety that would only be perceptible in person, in the soft light of the court, a secret signal of one's superior taste and wealth. It's the Heian equivalent of contouring, but with the goal of creating a more luminous, otherworldly flatness rather than defining features. Use it perfectly still, waiting for the mask to dry completely. It feels heavy now, a tangible weight on your skin. You catch your reflection in the dim bronze mirror. The person looking back at you is a stranger. Her face is a perfect, luminous white moon in the shadows of the room. It's serene, beautiful, and utterly blank. It has the impassive grace of a statue. You have successfully hidden yourself away. But what happens when you make a mistake? What if you sneeze during the drying process? Or a servant bumps into you, smudging your perfect canvas? The paste doesn't just wipe off. Removing it is an ordeal. There were no gentle makeup removers. The process often involved harsh scraping and the use of abrasive materials, which would leave the skin red and dry, making the next day's application even more difficult. This is why stillness and patience are not just virtues, they are practical necessities. The academic debate here is fascinating. Was this practice of creating a blank face a form of female oppression, erasing their identity to make them pleasing objects for men, or could it be seen as a source of power, allowing women to control their own image, presenting a formidable and unreadable mask to the world? Some scholars argue it was a way for women to armor themselves emotionally, hiding their true feelings behind a literal wall of makeup. Others see it as the ultimate symbol of their confinement, both social and physical. Perhaps it was both at the same time. For now, though, you don't have time for philosophical reflection. Your mask is dry. The first, and most foundational, step is complete. You have successfully erased your face. Now you must add the details that will bring this beautiful ghost to life. You now wear the perfect white mask of a Heian noblewoman. It feels cool, tight, and impersonal. It looks luminous in the dim light, but as you sit there, a serene statue of courtly grace, a slow, invisible process is beginning. The beautiful white powder you so carefully applied, the Oshiro eye, is not just a cosmetic, it is a poison, and it has just begun its insidious work. The most desirable, and therefore most expensive, white face powders of the era were made with a lead base. Specifically, white lead. Artisans would create it through a process of corrosion, exposing lead plates to acidic vapors, often from vinegar or fermenting manure. The resulting white, flaky substance was then scraped off, ground into a fine powder, and sold as the key ingredient for a flawless complexion. It was prized because it created a smoother, more opaque, and more brilliantly white finish than powders made from rice flour or ground clamshells. It was the luxury option, the high-definition makeup of its day, and it was catastrophically toxic. As you sit there, the lead is being absorbed directly through your skin. It's a slow process, but it's relentless. The lead particles pass through the pores and enter your bloodstream, where they begin their silent, systematic assault on your entire body. At first, you notice nothing. You simply enjoy the compliments on your beautifully pale skin. But over time, the mask that makes you beautiful on the outside begins to rot you from the inside. The first signs are on the skin itself. With long-term use, the lead-based Oshiro I would cause a host of dermatological problems. Your skin, beneath the mask, would become dry, discolored, and prone to lesions and sores. In a cruel twist of irony, the very makeup you used to hide your imperfections would create new, more severe ones. This created a vicious cycle. The worse your natural skin became, the more you needed to apply the thick, white paste to cover it up, leading to further damage. You become dependent on the very thing that is destroying you. But the damage goes far deeper than the skin. Lead poisoning, or plummeism, is a multi-symptom nightmare. As the lead accumulates in your system, you might start to feel irritable and fatigued. You could suffer from persistent abdominal pain and constipation, what was known in the period as senki, a catch-all term for painful internal ailments. Your joints would ache. You might develop a metallic taste in your mouth and a distinctive blue-black line along your gums, known as a Burton's line, a classic sign of heavy metal poisoning. The neurological effects are perhaps the most devastating. Lead is a potent neurotoxin. It can cause headaches, memory loss, and a decline in cognitive function. In severe cases, it leads to tremors, paralysis, and seizures. It's chilling to imagine a court so obsessed with poetry, wit, and intellectual wordplay, where the very tools of beauty were actively dimming the minds of its most celebrated women. There is a deep, dark tragedy in the image of a woman famed for her clever verses slowly losing her ability to compose them, all in the name of looking the part. One of the most heartbreaking consequences of lead poisoning was its effect on pregnancy and childbirth. Lead readily crosses the placental barrier, poisoning the fetus. Women who used lead makeup suffered from dramatically higher rates of miscarriages, stillbirths, and infant mortality. Children who did survive were often born with developmental disabilities and severe health problems. The pursuit of a beauty standard that signified aristocratic status was, in a very real way, jeopardizing the future of the aristocracy itself. A particularly strange, and often unmentioned, defect of lead-based makeup was its interaction with other substances. For instance, many cosmetics and medicines of the time contained sulfur. When sulfur came into contact with the lead carbonate on the skin, a chemical reaction could occur, turning the white makeup a ghastly black or gray. One can only imagine the horror of a noble woman discovering her perfect white mask has suddenly and inexplicably darkened. A moment of social catastrophe brought on by an unfortunate bit of chemistry. Historians and scientists are still working to understand the full extent of this public health crisis. By analyzing the skeletal remains of Heian-era aristocrats, particularly women, researchers have found shockingly high concentrations of lead in the bones. This physical evidence confirms what medical science would predict: the elite of Heian Japan were slowly poisoning themselves in the pursuit of an aesthetic ideal. The debate continues, however, on how aware the people of the time were of the connection. Did they know the powder was poison? It's likely they didn't understand the specific mechanism, but they surely saw the long-term effects. They saw the skin decay, the sickness, the tragic outcomes of pregnancies. Yet, the social pressure to conform was so immense that they continued the practice for centuries. The risk of being seen as ugly or common was, it seems, more terrifying than the risk of a slow, painful death. And so, you sit in your chamber, a vision of perfect white beauty. You are admired. You are envied. You are a success. But the price of that success is being paid in microscopic increments in every cell of your body. The sweet smell of the powder is the scent of your own slow decay. The mask of beauty is, in the most literal sense, a death mask in the making. The sun has set, casting the city of Heian into a deep, inky blackness punctuated only by the flickering of distant lanterns. Your official duties for the day are over. You've attended a poetry contest, perhaps, or exchanged witty notes with a suitor through your lady-in-waiting. Now, in the privacy of your chambers, you might think it's time to remove the heavy, toxic mask you've been wearing all day. You would be wrong. For the most dedicated followers of high-end beauty standards, the mask was not just for public appearances. It was a 24-month commitment. The ideal of beauty was so pervasive that a noble woman was expected to be a perfect vision at all times, even when she was sleeping. To be caught with a bare face, even by her own attendants, would be a source of profound shame. So, at night, you don't wash your face. You simply touch it up. You might tray powder any areas that have smudged or flecked, ensuring your complexion remains a perfect, ghostly white even in slumber. Imagine trying to sleep like this. You must lie perfectly still, on your back, your head resting on a hard, small wooden or ceramic pillow, designed to keep your elaborate hairstyle from being crushed. You can't toss and turn. You can't bury your face in a soft cushion. The white lead paste would smear all over the fine silk bedding, a costly and embarrassing mess. So you learn to sleep like a statue, a still life painting of a sleeping beauty. It's a disciplined, uncomfortable, and deeply unnatural way to rest. This round-the-clock application had dire consequences for the skin. Your pores are constantly clogged. Your skin can't breathe. The lead-based powder, combined with sweat and the natural oils of your skin, creates a perfect breeding ground for bacteria. Acne, rashes, and infections are a constant battle, fought in a losing war where the only solution offered is to apply an even thicker layer of the very substance causing the problem. The concept of letting your skin rest is completely alien. The mask becomes a second skin, one that is slowly suffocating your real one. This created a strange paradox of intimacy. A husband might never see his wife's true face, the face he fell in love with, or, more accurately, the face his family arranged a marriage with was the white, painted one. To reveal your natural face would be an act of almost shocking vulnerability, a level of intimacy that was perhaps never reached in many aristocratic marriages, which were often more about political and economic alliances than personal connection. The mask was a barrier, not just to the outside world, but sometimes to the people closest to you. One of the more bizarre, and rather disgusting, tidbits of this era's cosmetic history involves what happened when the Ohaguro eye would inevitably begin to flake as the day wore on, or after a night of stiff, statuesque sleep. The white paste would dry, crack, and fall off in small pieces. It would dust your shoulders and the collar of your robes like a toxic dandruff. A high-ranking noblewoman would have attendants whose job was, in part, to discreetly brush away these flakes, maintaining the illusion of perfection. But there are accounts in literature like the pillow book by Sei Shonagon, that describe waking up to find one's face looking blotchy and dreadful after the makeup has worn away in patches overnight. The morning touch-up was a race against time to repair the crumbling facade before anyone of importance could see it. The pressure to maintain this illusion was immense and came from all directions. It came from men who wrote poems praising the ethereal, moon-like beauty of a perfectly white face. It came from other women who were your fiercest competitors in the court's relentless status games. A woman with a flawed application, or, heaven forbid, a visible blemish, would be the subject of cruel gossip whispered behind beautifully painted fans. Her reputation, and by extension her family's honor, could be damaged. Beauty was not a personal choice, it was a political and social obligation. The historical debate around this practice often centers on the idea of the performance of gender and status. Some scholars argue that Heian noble women were constantly on stage, performing their role as paragons of aristocratic femininity. Their makeup, their clothing, their stilted movements were all part of a costume for a play that never ended. There were no off-duty moments. This relentless performance, while securing their status, must have taken an enormous psychological toll. The gap between the inner self and the outer persona, already wide, was cemented by a literal, physical layer of paint. So you lie there in the dark. The room is silent except for the chirping of a cricket outside your screen. You feel the tightness of the drying paste on your skin, a constant, physical reminder of your role. You are a work of art, and art does not rest. Art does not get comfortable. Art simply is. You close your eyes, careful not to squeeze them too tightly, and drift into a shallow, watchful sleep, hoping that when the morning light comes, the cracks in your beautiful mask are not too difficult to repair. The night offers no real respite, only a brief, still pause before the performance must begin all over again. You might assume that this intense, toxic, and time-consuming beauty regimen was a burden placed exclusively upon women. But as you navigate the corridors of the imperial palace, you'll notice something surprising. The men, at least. The high-ranking aristocratic men are just as pale as the women. The obsession with a ghostly white complexion was, in fact, an equal opportunity affliction. A Heian courtier, a man of status and refinement, would never dream of appearing in public with a sun-touched or ruddy complexion. That was the look of laborers and provincial warriors, men who toiled under the sun, to signal his elite status. A court noble also partook in the ritual of applying a shiro. While their application might have been slightly less thick and opaque than that of the women, the goal was the same: to achieve a smooth, pale, and delicately artificial look that distanced them from the world of physical effort. Imagine a government meeting. The minister of the left and the minister of the right are debating a point of law. Their faces both serene, powdered, and almost indistinguishable in their pallor. A young captain of the Imperial Guard, famed for his poetic skill, lounges elegantly, his face a perfect white oval that contrasts sharply with the dark lacquer of his ceremonial cap. This wasn't seen as effeminate, it was seen as the absolute peak of masculine sophistication. In the Heian court, a man's value was measured not by his physical prowess, but by his aesthetic sensibility, his skill in calligraphy, music, and poetry. A powdered face was a crucial part of that refined persona. These men faced the same health risks as the women. They, too, were slowly absorbing lead into their systems, suffering the same gradual decay of their skin, the same neurological damage, the same chronic pains. The pursuit of status through aesthetics was a danger that transcended gender lines. A whole class of people was, in essence, united by a shared, slow poisoning. But the male beauty standard had its own unique quirks. While they powdered their faces, most men did not shave their eyebrows and paint on the high moth brows. They kept their natural brows, though they were meticulously groomed. The most striking addition to the male look, however, was a small, neat goatee or a thin mustache. This was considered incredibly distinguished. The idea was a small, carefully trimmed patch of facial hair against the stark canvas of the white powdered skin. It was a mark of maturity and masculine authority in a world that otherwise seemed to value an almost androgynous delicacy. There's a particularly funny and telling detail about this male vanity found in court diaries and literature. Men were just as anxious about their appearance as women. They worried if their powder was applied correctly, if their robes were layered in the most fashionable colors, and, crucially, if their wispy goatees looked sufficiently elegant. There are accounts of men using charcoal to subtly enhance the color and shape of their facial hair, a practice not so different from using a modern eyebrow pencil. One of the more bizarre fads among some young, fashion-forward male aristocrats was a partial tooth blackening. Unlike the women, who typically blackened all their teeth after a certain age or upon marriage, some men would experiment by blackening only a few teeth in a specific pattern. It was a short-lived trend, a kind of avant-garde dental fashion statement. It highlights the playful, almost competitive nature of court aesthetics, where people were constantly looking for new ways to signal their superior and cutting-edge taste. It was the Heian equivalent of getting a single, edgy tattoo, but on your teeth. The historical debate here often revolves around Heian concepts of masculinity. For much of Western history, masculinity has been tied to ideas of ruggedness, strength, and action, but Heian masculinity was almost the opposite. It was defined by sensitivity, artistic talent, and physical grace. The powdered face was not a contradiction of their masculinity, it was an expression of it. Scholars are still trying to pinpoint exactly when and why this changed. The rise of the samurai class in the subsequent Kamakura period, with their warrior ethos and focus on martial skill, would eventually displace this delicate, courtly ideal of manhood with something far more rugged and familiar to our modern eyes. The powdered courtier would be replaced by the battle-hardened bushai. So as you observe this world, you realize that the pressure to be beautiful, or at least to look a certain way, is a universal burden within this gilded cage. A young man preparing for his first day at court would be just as nervous about his makeup as a young woman. He would check his reflection in the dim bronze mirror, making sure his face was pale enough, his small beard perfectly trimmed. His future, his career, and his social standing depended on it. In the quiet, shadowy halls of Heian Kyo, the men and women were partners in a shared, beautiful, and ultimately destructive performance. They were all wearing masks. Now that your face is a perfect, white, and toxic canvas, the real artistry can begin. It's time to address your eyebrows, but you're not going to shape them, or fill them in, or even pluck a few stray hairs. You are going to commit an act of cosmetic violence. You're going to remove them completely. You pick up the small, sharp razor from your lacquer cosmetic box. The blade glints in the soft light filtering through the paper screens. This part of the ritual, known as hikimeyu, is not for the faint of heart. With a steady hand, you bring the blade to your brow. There is no cream, no soothing gel. There is only the cold steel against your skin. You press down and draw the razor across, scraping away the dark hairs that frame your eyes. You repeat the motion, carefully, methodically, until nothing is left but smooth, powdered skin. If the razor seems too brutal, the alternative is hardly more pleasant. You could use a pair of tweezers to pluck each eyebrow hair out, one by one. It's a slower, more tedious process, and arguably more painful. A long session of sharp, stinging pinches. Some women even used a thick, resin-like substance that would be applied to the brow, allowed to harden, and then ripped off, taking the hairs with it, a primitive, antagonizing form of waxing. Why this total annihilation of a natural feature, the eyebrows, are one of the most expressive parts of the human face. They convey surprise, anger, concern, curiosity. By removing them, you are taking another significant step toward creating the ideal, impassive, and unreadable mask of the Heian noblewoman. A face without natural eyebrows is a face that has surrendered its ability to show spontaneous emotion. It becomes a tranquil, controlled surface, perfectly aligned with the courtly values of emotional restraint and serene composure. This practice also had a practical, aesthetic purpose within the Heian beauty system. The goal was to create a higher, more open forehead. A wide, high forehead was considered a sign of intelligence and aristocratic breeding. By removing your natural brows, you effectively raise your eyebrow line to a new, artificial position higher up on the forehead, creating the illusion of that desired facial geography. Your face is being ray-proportioned, sculpted according to an abstract ideal rather than your natural bone structure. This wasn't a one-time event. The eyebrow here, of course, grows back. To maintain this perfectly blank state, you would have to shave or pluck every few days. The skin in that area would often be left in a state of perpetual irritation, reddened sensitive under the layer of white powder. It was a constant, painful upkeep, another hidden discomfort behind the serene facade. One little known fact about this practice is that it wasn't just for adult women. Noble families would begin this ritual on their daughters at a young age. A girl, upon her coming-of-age ceremony typically between the ages of 11 and 14, would have her eyebrows shaved for the first time. This act, often performed along with her first tooth-blackening ceremony, was a powerful rite of passage. It symbolized her transition from childhood to womanhood, her entry into the complex world of court society. It was the moment she began to leave her natural self behind and start constructing her public, aristocratic persona. Imagine a young girl on the cusp of adolescence having to undergo this painful and transformative ritual, her face forever altered to fit a rigid social mold. The debate among historians on this topic is fascinating. Was the shaving of the eyebrows a symbol of female subjugation, a way to literally deface women and rob them of their natural expressivences, or was it, from their perspective, a liberating act of beautification, a way to transcend the raw and unrefined state of nature and achieve a higher, more artistic form of existence? Some scholars point to the fact that this was a practice done by women for a world largely defined by female aesthetics and social circles. In this view, it could be seen as a form of cultural capital, a mark of belonging to the most exclusive and sophisticated club in Japan. So you look into your hazy bronze mirror. The upper half of your face is now a startlingly blank expanse of white. Where your eyebrows once were, there is now only smooth, powdered skin. You look strange, alien, and incomplete. The familiar architecture of your face is gone. You've created the canvas. The next step is to paint. But for now, you must get used to this new, empty landscape on your own forehead. It is the face of a true Heian noblewoman, a face where nature has been scraped away to make room for art. Your forehead is now a blank, white canvas, smooth and empty. The expressive arches that once sat above your eyes are gone. It's time to create your new eyebrows. You won't be drawing them where they used to be. That would be far too logical, too natural. Instead, you'll be placing them in a position that is deliberately, artistically, and bizarrely high. You pick up your pencil, which is not a pencil at all, but a small stick of soku, a type of charcoal made from burning paulownia wood or rapeseed oil soot. You dip the end lightly in water to create a soft, inky pigment. Now comes the moment of truth, a test of your steady hand and aesthetic judgment. You lift the charcoal stick to your forehead, far above your natural brow line, almost halfway to your hairline. With a gentle touch, you begin to paint. You are not drawing fine, hair-like strokes. You are creating a soft, smudgy Y shape. The ideal, most fashionable style was to paint two small, faint ovals. They were often described as hozuki, moth-like, because they resembled the markings on a moth's wings. They were also sometimes called tanamogiri, or palace curling brows, which is a slightly less poetic but perhaps more descriptive name. These were not meant to be sharp or defined. They were meant to be soft, dreamy, and slightly melancholic, like two faint clouds floating in the white sky of your forehead. The placement was everything. Too low, and you'd look like you were trying and failing to mimic your natural brows. Too high, and you'd look comical. Too close together, and you'd appear perpetually worried. Too far apart, and you'd seem vacant. The perfect placement created a look of serene, slightly sorrowful nobility. It was an expression of mono no aware, that uniquely Japanese sensitivity to the transience of all things, painted directly onto your face. Your new eyebrows were not for expressing your own feelings, but for embodying a philosophical and artistic ideal. As you carefully smudge the charcoal into two perfect ovals, you realize how this completes the doll-like illusion. With your natural brows gone and these stylized marks painted high above, your eyes seem larger and more doll-like. Your entire face takes on an unhuman quality, something closer to a beautifully crafted object than a living person. This was, of course, the entire point. The goal was to transcend the mundane reality of being a human and become a living symbol of beauty and refinement. A strange and rarely mentioned aspect of this practice is that the shape and style of these painted brows could be a subtle indicator of a woman's age and status. A very young girl, just after her coming-of-age ceremony, might wear her painted brows as thin, delicate crescents. A mature, high-ranking court lady would wear the classic, smudgy Y ovals. The subtle shift in shape was a visual cue, a way of communicating one's place in the courtly hierarchy without saying a word. It was a silent language written in charcoal. The result of this practice, combined with the white face, had a very specific effect in the dim, shadowy interiors of Heian palaces. The white face would catch and reflect the faint candlelight, glowing softly in the gloom. The high, dark smudges of the eyebrows would be one of the few distinct features visible from a distance, hovering mysteriously above the unseen eyes. It created an ethereal, almost ghostly appearance, which was considered the height of beauty and intrigue. A woman's face was not meant to be seen clearly, it was meant to be a suggestive and haunting impression in the half-light. The academic world still argues about the symbolic meaning behind this specific choice. Why smudges? Why so high? Some historians suggest it was an attempt to mimic the appearance of someone whose brows are raised in a permanent state of gentle, tragic surprise. Others believed it was influenced by certain Buddhist statuary, which sometimes featured similar markings. A more practical theory suggests that by moving the eyebrows up, it created more space to show off the forehead, which, as we know, was considered a mark of intelligence and beauty. The true reason is likely a complex blend of all these factors, an aesthetic choice that was both symbolic and practical within its unique cultural context. You lean back to assess your work in the bronze mirror. The reflection is hazy, but you can make out the effect. The white, oval face, the two dark, moth-like smudges floating serenely near your hairline. The effect is complete. You no longer look like yourself. You look like a lady of the Heian court. You have successfully transformed your face into a mask of high fashion. It is beautiful. It is strange. And it is the price of admission to this exclusive world. Now, with your new face firmly in place, you must turn your attention to the final, and perhaps most challenging, detail of your facial transformation, your smile. Your face is almost complete. The white mask is set. The moth-like brows are floating serenely on your forehead. Now, for the final touch, the one that will transform your smile from a simple expression into a statement of high fashion and marital status. It's time to blacken your teeth. You turn your attention to the small, unassuming pot you examined earlier. As you lift the lid, the smell hits you. It's a deeply unpleasant, sour, and metallic odor, the stench of decay and rust. This is your tooth dye, and the process of making it is as unappealing as its smell. The recipe for this concoction, known as cane Ohaguro Ohaguro, is a piece of primitive and rather foul chemistry. The primary ingredient is iron. You would start by taking a handful of iron scraps, so nails, needles, or random bits of metal and placing them in a small pot. You would then pour a liquid over them. This could be strong, bitter tea, or, more commonly, rice wine, vinegar, or sake. You then simply let this mixture set for days, for weeks. As it sits, the acidic liquid slowly corrodes the iron, causing it to rust and dissolve. The mixture would be stirred occasionally, exposing the iron to the air to encourage oxidation. The liquid would gradually turn a murky, reddish brown, then a deep, sludgy black. It would also begin to ferment, adding a layer of pungent, vinegary rot to the already metallic smell. To enhance the color and give it a lacquer-like finish, a pinch of a powdered substance called fushi was often added. This powder came from the gall nuts of the Japanese sumac tree, which are rich in tannic acid. The tannic acid would react with the iron acetate in the liquid, creating a powerful, insoluble black dye ferritinate. So, the little pot in front of you contains a foul-smelling, semi-toxic slurry of iron filings, acetic acid, and tannic acid. This is what you are about to paint onto your teeth. The process required a certain amount of ritual and preparation. You would need a small, fine bristled brush, perhaps a tuft of animal hair tied to a stick. You would also need to prime your teeth. Before applying the black dye, you would often chew on something astringent, like pomegranate rind, to clean the surface of the teeth and help the dye adhere more effectively. Let's pause to consider a small, but important, detail that often gets lost in the description of the Ohaguro ritual: the taste. By all historical accounts, the taste of the king miso was as repulsive as its smell. It was described as being incredibly bitter, sour, and metallic, a taste that would linger in the mouth for hours. The application process was a weekly or even daily ordeal that required you to willingly coat your mouth in this foul-tasting substance. It was a test of fortitude, a commitment to beauty that required you to overcome your most basic sensory revulsions. This practice wasn't just pulled out of thin air. The use of iron and tan to create black dye was common in many areas of life. It was used to dye fabrics and to create ink for calligraphy. The innovation of the Heian period was to take this industrial process and apply it to the human body. It's a perfect example of the era's obsession with aesthetics, turning even the most mundane chemical reactions into a tool for personal beautification. There's an ongoing scholarly discussion about whether different families or regions had their own secret recipes for Ohaguro. Some historical texts hint at variations in the formula. One family might add a particular blend of spices or herbs to their mixture, not just for a slightly different shade of black, but perhaps to try and mask the horrific taste and smell. This suggests a certain level of personal craft and pride in creating the perfect tooth-blackening liquid. It wasn't just a cosmetic, it was a home-brewed chemical potion, a family secret passed down from mother to daughter. You stare at the pot. The dark, oily liquid seems to stare back at you. This is the last barrier between you and the Heian ideal of beauty. It requires you to overcome your sense of smell, your sense of taste, and your natural instinct to avoid putting rusty, fermented things in your mouth. But in the world of the Heian court, a smile that revealed white teeth was considered unrefined, almost beastly. To be truly beautiful, you had to erase that natural flash of white and replace it with a sophisticated, mysterious darkness. With a deep breath to steady your nerves, you pick up the brush. It is time for the sacrifice. You hold the small brush, its bristles stained with the inky, foul-smelling liquid. This is the moment of commitment. The first application of Ohaguro is more than just a cosmetic choice. It is a profound rite of passage, a ceremony known as Haguron. For a young noblewoman, this ritual typically coincided with her coming of age, marking her readiness for marriage and her official entry into the adult world of the court. It was a public declaration that her childhood was over. You bring the brush to your lips. The bitter, metallic scent is overwhelming. You carefully paint the dark liquid onto the surface of your front teeth. The sensation is unpleasant. The taste is as bad as you feared, a revolting combination of rust, vinegar, and bitterness that seems to coat your entire tongue. You have to fight the instinct to spit it out. You must sit patiently, your mouth slightly open, allowing the dye to begin its work. The chemical reaction starts almost immediately. The tannic acid in the formula helps the iron solution bond to the calcium phosphate in your tooth enamel. It's a dye, but it also has a corrosive element. You might feel a slight, stinging sensation on your gums, a warning sign from your body that what you're applying is not entirely benign. You must paint carefully, trying to cover every visible part of each tooth while avoiding as much contact with your gums and tongue as possible. It is a slow, meticulous process. After the first layer is applied, you must let it dry. This might involve sitting still for a considerable amount of time, a fan gently wafting air into your mouth to speed up the process. Once dry, you apply another coat and another to achieve the desired lustrous, deep black color, a shade often compared to the glossy finish of high-end lacquerware. Multiple applications are necessary. The entire process could take hours. A long and deeply unpleasant morning dedicated to the single, transformative act. This first sacrifice was often a family affair. A young girl's mother, aunts, or older sisters would guide her through the process, offering support and instruction. There was a sponsor, a KNOY or tooth-blackening godmother, usually an older, respected female relative, who would ceremonially apply the first stroke of the dye. This turned a painful ordeal into a shared female ritual, a bonding experience that connected generations of women in a common, strange tradition. It was a tangible passing down of what it meant to be an adult woman in their society. One fashionably gross detail that historical texts mention is the need for a spit bowl. During the long process of application, application, saliva would naturally build up in your mouth. You couldn't swallow, as the dye was not meant to be ingested. So, you would have to periodically undiscreetly spit into a bowl held by an attendant. The mixture of saliva and black eye would create a rather grim-looking sludge, another of the many unglamorous realities hidden behind the beautiful final product. Once the final coat was dry, the transformation was jarring. You look in the bronze mirror, and when you part your lips, you see not a familiar smile, but a dark, black void. It fundamentally changes the appearance of your mouth and, by extension, your entire face. The teeth, which were once individual elements, now merge into a single, uniform block of color. It's a shocking alteration, a permanent, or at least semi-permanent modification of your body. From this day forward, your smile will be a flash of darkness, not of light. The historical debate around Ohaguro often touches on its symbolism of taming. Natural white teeth were associated with animals with a wilder, untamed state. By blackening them, a woman was signaling that she had moved beyond this natural state and embraced a civilized, cultured, and controlled form of beauty. It was a way of showing that she had surrendered her wild nature to the refined rules of society. This is why it was so closely tied to marriage. It was a visual symbol that a woman was claimed, her youthful wildness now domesticated. For you, sitting in your chamber with a mouth full of the foul taste of iron, these symbolic meanings might feel very abstract. The reality is physical and immediate. It is the discomfort, the smell, the taste, and the shocking image in the mirror. You have sacrificed the bright, white smile of your youth. In its place, you have gained the sophisticated, dark smile of a high and noble woman. You have paid the price, and now you must learn to live with the result. To see this new, dark smile not as a loss, but as the very definition of beauty. You've endured the foul taste and the tedious application. Your teeth are now a uniform, polished black. You part your lips in front of the bronze mirror, and the sight is still unsettling to your modern sensibilities. But now, you must try to see it through Heian eyes. You must understand why this dark void was considered not just beautiful, but superior to a natural smile. The first key is to remember the environment. You are not living in a world of bright, electric lights. Your world is one of shadows. The interiors of Heian palaces and residences were deliberately kept dark. The only light sources were the soft, diffuse daylight filtering through paper screens, or at night, the small, flickering flame of an oil lamp or a candle. In this world of perpetual twilight, things are not seen with sharp clarity. They are perceived as impressions, as shapes moving in the gloom. Now, imagine a woman in this setting. Her face is a luminous, pale white. When she smiles, if her teeth were also white, the effect in the dim light would be startling, even grotesque. The individual teeth would catch the light, creating a flash of white that could look like a grimace or, as some period texts suggest, the bared teeth of a skull. That would be a gaping, uncontrolled expression in a culture that valued subtlety and restraint above all else. But with blackened teeth, the effect is entirely different. When a woman with Ohaguro smiles in the candlelight, the black teeth do not reflect the light. They absorb it. They disappear into the natural shadow of the mouth. The smile is no longer about the teeth, it's about the gentle curve of the lips against the pale skin and the subtle glint in the eyes. It becomes a gesture of immense subtlety and mystery. It's a hint of a smile, an invitation to imagine the emotion behind it, rather than seeing it displayed overtly. This was considered far more alluring, erotic, and sophisticated. Beyond the aesthetics, Ohaguro had a surprising and highly practical benefit. It helped prevent tooth decay. The concoction of iron filings, acid, and tannins created a coating on the teeth that was, in effect, a primitive dental sealant. The iron-rich lacquer formed a protective layer over the enamel, making it more resistant to the acids that cause cavities. Furthermore, the chemicals used had antiseptic properties that likely helped to kill oral bacteria. In an era with no dentists, no fluoride, and a diet that could be surprisingly high in sugars from fruit, rice, and sweet snacks, this was a significant advantage. People who practiced Ohaguro generally had better dental health than those who did not. It's a fantastic irony. A cosmetic practice that looked bizarre was also one of the most effective forms of preventative medicine available at the time. A little-known aspect of the Ohaguro aesthetic is the importance of the lacquer light shine. It wasn't enough for the teeth to be black, they had to be a deep, lustrous, glossy black, like fine lacquerware. This required diligent maintenance. The dye would wear off over time, especially with eating and drinking, so it had to be replayed every few days, or at least once a week. A woman with faded, dull, or patchy black teeth would be seen as lazy or neglectful. Her beauty and status diminished. The constant tray application was a signal of her commitment to maintaining her appearance, a sign of her refinement and discipline. This leads to a point of contention among historians and dental anthropologists. Did the corrosive nature of the dye ultimately do more harm than good while the coating was protective? The acidic nature of the cane could, over a very long period, potentially damage the enamel and irritate the gums. The historical evidence from skeletal remains is somewhat ambiguous. While many skeletons with blackened teeth show fewer cavities, some also show signs of gum disease or enamel erosion. It seems the practice was a double-edged sword. It offered real protection against decay, but it was not without its own risks. The perfect smile was a constant, careful balancing act between preservation and corrosion. So as you slowly grow accustomed to your new smile, you begin to understand its logic. It is a beauty born of darkness and shadow. It is a beauty that is subtle, mysterious, and controlled, and it is a beauty that, beneath its strange and artificial surface, holds a secret, practical wisdom. Your dark smile is a shield, protecting your teeth from decay while projecting an image of the highest courtly grace. In the flickering candlelight of a Heian evening, you offer a slight, enigmatic smile to a potential suitor glimpsed through a screen. He cannot see your teeth. He only sees a graceful curve of your lips against your glowing white face, and it is the most beautiful thing he has ever seen. Your transformation is now nearly complete, at least facially. The white mask, the high mouth-like brows, the black lacquered teeth, they all work together to create a single, unified aesthetic. But the blackening of your teeth was more than just the final step in a makeup routine. It was a profound social signal. For a woman, a dark smile was the ultimate emblem of her status as an adult, and more specifically, as a married woman or one who was of marriageable age. It was a brand, a permanent marker of her new role in society. Before the Hag ceremony, a young girl's white teeth were a symbol of her youth, her immaturity, her unclaimed status. Her natural smile was part of her childhood. The moment she adopted the black-toothed smile, she crossed a social threshold from which there was no return. It was a visual cue to the entire court that she was no longer a child, but a woman ready to take on the serious responsibilities of marriage, family alliances, and the continuation of a noble lineage. Once married, the Ohaguro became a steadfast symbol of fidelity and commitment to her husband and his family. The act of erasing her natural smile and replacing it with this artificial, tamed one was seen as a gesture of surrendering her youthful wildness. Her beauty was no longer her own, but something that belonged to her new household. It's a concept that feels deeply uncomfortable to modern minds, but in the context of Heian Japan, it was a fundamental part of the social fabric. A married woman with white teeth would have been a scandal, a shocking rejection of her wifely duties and her place in the social order. This practice also created a clear visual distinction between the noble ladies of the court and the common women who worked in the fields or the city markets. While Ohaguro would eventually spread to other social classes in later periods, during the height of the Heian era, it was a practice largely confined to the aristocracy. A noblewoman's black smile was an instant signifier of her elite status, a sign that she belonged to the small, privileged percentage of the population who had the time, resources, and social obligation to engage in such an elaborate and expensive ritual. Interestingly, while for women Ohaguro was a permanent and serious commitment tied to marriage, for men it was a bit more fluid. As we touched on before, aristocratic men also practiced tooth-blackening, but it didn't carry the same rigid marital symbolism. For them, it was more a sign of general maturity and high rank. A nobleman might blacken his teeth upon receiving a significant court promotion or reaching a certain age. It was also common for warriors of the Tiri and Minamoto clans to practice it. However, they could, and sometimes did, let the dye fade without the same social repercussions a woman would face. Her black smile was a permanent tattoo of her status. His was more like a formal suit he could choose to wear. A fascinating and slightly bizarre sub-practice related to this was the creation of Ohaguro beta, RI, a type of yokai or monster from Japanese folklore. This creature is depicted as a female ghost, beautiful from a distance, who turns to reveal a face that is nothing but a huge, grinning mouth full of blackened teeth. There are no eyes, no nose, just the smile. This folk creature likely arose from the unsettling visual of the Ohaguro smile, twisting a symbol of aristocratic beauty into an image of horror. It speaks volumes about the deep psychological impact this practice had, becoming so ingrained in the collective consciousness that it even spawned its own monster. The academic debate here focuses on the agency of the women themselves. Were they passive victims of a patriarchal system that branded them like property, or did they actively embrace Ohaguro as a source of pride and identity? Some scholars argue that by participating in this ritual, women were actively claiming their adult status and the power that came with it. A married woman, as the head of her own household, wielded considerable influence behind the scenes. The black smile was a symbol of that authority, a sign that she was no longer a girl to be trifled with, but a matriarch to be respected. In this light, the practice can be seen not just as a mark of submission, but as a badge of honor. So as you go about your day in the palace, your black smile is a constant, silent broadcast of who you are. It tells everyone you meet that you are a lady of rank, that you are an adult, and that you are committed to your role in this intricate social web. It is a heavy burden and a source of power all at once. Every time you speak, every time a subtle smile graces your lips, you are reinforcing your identity. You have exchanged a natural feature for a potent cultural symbol, and in the world of Heian Japan, that is a very powerful bargain to have made. Your face is now a perfect, if unsettling, work of art, but the aesthetic engineering of the Heian noblewoman doesn't stop at the neck. Now you must be dressed, and this is not a simple matter of choosing a nice outfit. You are about to be encased in a magnificent, heavy, and incredibly restrictive garment known as the Junihaito. The name literally translates to 12-layer robe, but that's a bit of a misnomer. The number of layers could vary, sometimes reaching as many as 20. The process of getting dressed is a ritual in itself, one that you cannot perform alone. Your attendants are essential. You begin with the innermost garments, a simple white silk loincloth and a short robe. Then comes the nogab akama, a pair of long, pleated, flowing trousers, usually in a vibrant red, that trail behind you. This is the foundation. And now, the layering begins. Your attendants bring the first robe, the haito. It's an unlined silk robe, and its color is chosen with care. Then comes another layer, and another, and another. Each robe is slightly shorter than the one beneath it, creating a stunning cascade of color at the sleeves. Color, then hem. This layering of colors, known as kasani no iron, was a highly developed art form. The specific combination of colors was dictated by the season, the occasion, and your personal taste. A spring combination might involve shades of plum blossom and new green willow. An autumn palette would feature the deep reds and golds of maple leaves. To choose an inappropriate color combination was a sign of poor taste and a lack of refinement, a serious social blunder. The robes are made of heavy, patterned silk. As each layer is added, you feel the weight settle onto your shoulders and back. One layer is manageable, 2 is still fine. By the 5th, you start to feel the pressure. By the 10th, the weight is significant. A full Junihaito could weigh up to 20 kilograms, about 44 pounds. Imagine carrying that weight on your frame all day long. It dramatically restricts your movement. You cannot run, or even walk quickly. You move with a slow, deliberate, gliding motion, your feet shuffling unseen beneath the voluminous robes. This enforced slowness was part of the aesthetic. A noblewoman was never to appear rushed or hurried. The sheer bulk of the Junihaito completely obscures your natural body shape. As we noted earlier, the Heian ideal was not one of slenderness. Underneath all this fabric, a slightly plump figure was considered desirable. The robes create their own silhouette, a sort of triangular shape that is wide at the hem and narrow at the shoulders. You are not a woman wearing a dress, you are a human frame upon which an exquisite textile sculpture has been constructed. Your body is secondary to the clothes you inhabit. A particularly curious and often overlooked element of the Junihaito is the mo, a long, apron-like train that was attached to the back and trail behind you. It was often elaborately decorated with painted or embroidered designs, depicting scenes from nature or mythology. The mo was a purely ceremonial part of the outfit, a final flourish of fabric that added even more weight and enhancements. It was the textile equivalent of a peacock's tail, beautiful and utterly impractical. Living in this garment was a constant challenge. Simple actions become monumental tasks. Sitting down required a specific technique of arranging the layers around you to create a perfect, circular cushion of silk. Getting back up often required assistance. Using the toilet involved a complex process of lifting the numerous layers out of the way, a task that was as undignified as it was difficult. The Junihaito was, in essence, a beautiful prison of fabric, one that enforced a life of stillness and dependence. There is a historical debate about how often the full, formal Juni Haito was actually worn. Some scholars argue that it was reserved for the most important court ceremonies and rituals. For daily life, women likely wore a reduced number of layers, a more practical though still cumbersome version of the outfit known as a ko-yu chiji. However, even this casual wear involved multiple heavy layers and significantly restricted movement. The principle remained the same: beauty was equated with a kind of splendid immobility. So you stand there, finally dressed. You are a walking masterpiece of textile art. The colors at your sleeves are a perfect poem of the current season. The weight on your shoulders is a constant reminder of your high status. You can barely move, but you look magnificent. Your face is a white mask. Your smile is a dark mystery, and your body is a mountain of silk. You are the complete package, a perfect, beautiful, and utterly constrained icon of the Heian court. You are ready to take your place, sitting perfectly still behind a bamboo screen. For the rest of the day, you are now a vision of Heian beauty: a pale face, dark smile, and a body encased in a mountain of exquisite silk. But there is one final, invisible layer to your presentation, a detail that is perhaps more important than any visual element. It is your scent. In an era before daily bathing, unmodern deodorants, the management of personal fragrance was a critical art form, and the Heian aristocracy were masters of it. Given the sheer weight and complexity of the Juni Haito, and the fact that you might wear the same inner layers for several days, personal hygiene, as we know it, was a challenge. Bathing was an infrequent and laborious event. This meant that the natural smells of the human body were a constant reality. But the Heian nobility did not seek to eliminate these smells with soap and water. They sought to overwhelm them, to mask them with a cloud of complex, intoxicating perfume. You were not meant to smell clean, you were meant to smell of wealth, sophistication, and mystery. Your personal fragrance was not applied directly to the skin like a modern perfume. Instead, it was infused into your clothing, your hair, and the very air of your living quarters. The primary method for this was the burning of incense, or takamona, but this wasn't just lighting a simple incense stick. The Heian nobles concocted their own personal blends of fragrant woods, resins, and spices, a practice known as eiwaziko. Imagine your attendants preparing your signature scent. They would take a base of powdered aloes with ginkgo or sandalwood by A.K. Yudan, both incredibly precious and expensive materials imported from the continent. To this, they would add a complex cocktail of other ingredients: cloves, cinnamon, spikenard, camphor, musk, and ambergris. Each noble family, and indeed each individual, had their own secret recipe. The ingredients would be ground together and kneaded with honey or plum pulp to form small balls of paste like incense called an eriko. The process of perfuming your clothes was a ritual in itself. Your layered robes would not be folded and put away in a chest. Instead, they would be draped over a large, cage-like frame made of bamboo or lacquerware. This frame was called a fused-do. Beneath this frame, a censer containing one of your smoldering incense balls would be placed. Over several hours, the fragrant smoke would rise, slowly and thoroughly permeating every fiber of the heavy silk robes. When you put them on, the scent would be sealed within the layers, releasing a subtle puff of perfume with your every slow, deliberate movement. Your hair, too, was perfumed. After the arduous process of washing and drying your floor-length dresses, you would sit next to a censer, allowing the fragrant smoke to infuse your hair. A beautifully scented hair was considered incredibly alluring. One of the most peculiar and intimate ways of using fragrance was to carry a small, beautifully crafted sachet or pomander, called in Igoibukuroi, tucked into your sleeves. This would contain a blend of powdered incense ingredients, and as you moved your hands or gestured with a fan, it would release a little burst of your personal scent. It was a subtle, almost secret, way of announcing your presence. The competition over fragrance was fierce. At court gatherings, people would subtly critique each other's perfume blends. A man might fall in love with a woman he has never seen, simply by catching a whiff of her unique incense as her sleeve brushes past a screen. In the tale of Genji, characters are often identified and remembered by their signature scents. A perfume blend that was considered clumsy, too strong, or old-fashioned could be a source of social embarrassment. Creating a scent that was unique, elegant, and perfectly suited to the season was a mark of supreme good taste. This leads to a fascinating point of debate for historians and chemists. What did these perfumes actually smell like? We have the recipes, but we can't be entirely sure of the quality and scent profile of the ancient ingredients. The musk deer and sperm whales that produced musk and ambergris are now endangered, and their modern equivalents may not be the same. Scholars who have attempted to recreate these ancient recipes describe them as incredibly complex, rich, and darkless like a light, floral modern perfume and more like a heavy, spicy, and deeply woody fragrance. It was a scent designed to blend with, rather than erase, the natural human musk. So as you sit in your dimly lit chamber, you are not just a visual spectacle, you are an olfactory one as well. The air around you is heavy with your signature blend of aloes wood, cloves, and secret spices. It clings to your 20 kilograms of silk and your river of black hair. It is your calling card, a silent announcement of your taste, your wealth, and your identity. In the world of Heian Japan, you are not truly beautiful until you smell beautiful. You are now fully constructed. Your face is a white mask with painted brows and a black smile. Your body is a mountain of perfumed silk. You are a walking, breathing, fragrant work of art. And now, what do you do? You retreat. The final element of Heian beauty is not an adornment, but an act of concealment. The ideal noblewoman was not meant to be seen directly. She was an object of beauty to be glimpsed, to be imagined, to be perceived through layers of obstruction. You take your place in the women's quarters of the estate, a world that is a maze of rooms separated not by solid walls, but by a series of screens. There are the standing screens, or byobu, which are folding panels often decorated with beautiful landscape paintings. There are the portable curtains of state, or kicho, which are silk panels draped over a T-shaped stand. And most importantly, there are the bamboo blinds, or sudr, which hang from the eaves of the veranda, separating the interior of the house from the outside world. Your entire life is lived behind these barriers. When a male visitor comes to call a potential suitor, a brother, or even your own father, you do not meet him face to face. He sits on the veranda, on the other side of the bamboo blind. You sit inside. In the gloom, he cannot see your carefully constructed face. You cannot see his. Your only connection is through your voices, and through the tantalizing glimpses you might get of each other through the thin slats of the blind. This enforced separation turned courtship into a game of sensory hide-and-seek. A man could not judge a woman by her appearance in the way we do today. Instead, he had to rely on other clues. He would listen to the sound of her voice, the elegance of her speech, and the wit of her conversation. He would judge her by the quality of her poetry, which would be passed back and forth on beautifully colored paper by an attendant. He would catch a glimpse of the color combination of her layered sleeves, peeking out from beneath the blind, and assess her taste. He would be captivated by the unique fragrance of her incense that wafted through the screen. In essence, a woman's beauty was an abstract concept, a composite image built from these disembodied clues. The man would have to imagine her face, her soul, her spirit. This act of imagination, this process of building a fantasy around a half-seen, half-sensed person, was considered the very height of romance and eroticism. The mystery was the point. To see a woman directly would be to shatter the illusion, to replace the perfect imagined beauty with mundane reality. This is why accidental viewings are such a dramatic and pivotal moment in Heian literature like the tale of Genji. A man might hide in the garden to catch a glimpse of a lady when she lifts the blind for a moment, and that brief, forbidden sight of her real self would fuel his obsession for years. These moments were scandalous, exciting, and deeply improper. A strange but telling detail of this culture of concealment is the sashi air, or incident. When a noble lady traveled outside her home, she would do so in a heavy, enclosed carriage called a giestra, a kind of ox-drawn wooden box. The windows of the carriage would be covered with their own silken bamboo blinds. She would be completely hidden from public view. If she needed to see something outside, she wouldn't lift the main blind. Instead, she might use a small, lacquered stick to slightly lift just a tiny corner of the blind, allowing her a sliver of a view while remaining almost entirely concealed. The world of women was a world of whispers, shadows, and screens. Their power and influence were real, but they were exercised indirectly. A woman could make or break a man's career at court through her connections and her family's influence, but she would do so from behind her kicho. This physical separation created a unique form of female community, confined together in their quarters. Women built intense friendships, rivalries, and alliances. Their attendants, the ladies in waiting, were their confidants, their spies, and their primary connection to the outside world. The academic debate on this topic is intense. Was this culture of concealment a form of extreme patriarchal control, effectively imprisoning women in their own homes and turning them into invisible objects of male fantasy? Or did this separation grant women a unique form of power and autonomy? Some feminist scholars argue that by controlling who could see them and how they were seen, women maintained a powerful aura of mistaken authority. Their seclusion gave them a space away from the male gaze, allowing them to cultivate their own distinct culture of literature, art, and social interaction. The truth, as is often the case, is likely a complex mixture of both. It was both a cage and a sanctuary. So use it behind your bamboo blind. The sun is setting, and the world outside is turning 2 shades of orange and purple. You can hear the evening sounds of the city, but you are separate from it. You are a secret. Your beauty is aroma, a poem, a fragrance on the breeze. It is a powerful and lonely existence, to be the most beautiful thing in the world, and for no one to have ever truly seen you. There is one element of your appearance that is not hidden, not artificial, and not restrained. In fact, it is the only part of you that is encouraged to be extravagantly, gloriously, and naturally on display. It is your hair. In the Heian period, a woman's hair was her ultimate glory, the single most powerful symbol of her femininity, health, and aristocratic lineage, and the ideal was simple. Longer was always better. The perfect hair was described as kurokami, raven black, with a deep, glossy sheen that reflected the candlelight. It had to be perfectly straight, without a hint of a wave or curl, and most importantly, it had to be long, impossibly long. The benchmark for truly beautiful hair was that it should be longer than your own height, trailing on the floor behind you as you walked and pooling around you, like a black silk river when you sat down. The most celebrated beauties of the age were said to have hair that was a foot or 2 longer than they were at all. Records from the era mention women with hair reaching an incredible 7 meters, about 23 feet in length. This obsession with long hair was deeply rooted in the culture's beliefs about life force and vitality. Hair was seen as a direct manifestation of a woman's life energy. Long, thick, healthy hair indicated that she was healthy, fertile, and possessed a strong spirit. It was the ultimate genetic status symbol, a visible sign that she came from good stock. A woman with thin, short, or dull hair would be seen as sickly or having a weak constitution, making her a less desirable marriage partner. The hair was the one part of a woman that was allowed to be sensuous and free, while her face was a static mask and her body was hidden under rigid layers of silk. Her hair was dynamic. In literature, Poets would write endlessly about the beauty of a woman's hair cascading over her shoulders, or the electrifying moment when a man might catch a glimpse of it, accidentally unbound. It was the primary locus of female eroticism. In the tale of Genji, Prince Genji's first proper look at his future wife, Murasaki, is a moment where he sees her long, beautiful hair, and he is instantly captivated. This aesthetic ideal placed an enormous emphasis on hair care from a very young age. A noble girl's hair was never cut after her coming-of-age ceremony. It was simply allowed to grow, year after year, decade after decade. It was her life's work, a living testament to her patience and her aristocratic blood. A particularly strange and revealing detail about the hair obsession was the practice of hair judging contests. At court, women and sometimes men, who also valued long hair, though not to the same extreme, might participate in kamiye-was-e competitions where they would literally compare the length, thickness, and beauty of their tresses. A woman would kneel, and her attendants would carefully unspool her hair, stretching it out to its full length to be measured and admired by the judges. Winning such a contest was a source of immense pride and would solidify a woman's reputation as a great beauty. However, this spectacular feature was also a spectacular burden. Living with hair that was longer than your own body was, to put it mildly, impractical. It was heavy. It got caught on things. Simply moving around your own quarters without stepping on it or getting it tangled in a screen was a daily challenge. This is another reason why the life of a Heian noblewoman was so sedentary. Ohaguro, as much as her clothing, tethered her to a life of stillness. There's a scholarly debate about the natural ends of this feature. While the ideal was for the hair to be one's own, was it always? Some historians speculate that the use of hair extensions or switches, known as kai-izura, might have been more common than the literature admits. A woman with naturally thinner hair might have subtly woven in extra locks to achieve the desired volume and length. This would have been a closely guarded secret, as the ideal was for the hair to be a pure expression of one's own vitality. Admitting to wearing extensions would be like admitting your life force was weak. So you spend most of your day sitting, your glorious black hair spread out around you on the tatami mats. It is your pride, your joy, and the most celebrated aspect of your beauty. It is the one part of you that is truly, vibrantly alive. But as we will see, maintaining this living crown of glory was a monumental task, a daily struggle that required a team of helpers and a level of patience that is almost impossible for us to imagine. Your greatest beauty was also your greatest burden. Your magnificent, floor-length hair is a sight to behold, a river of black silk that is the envy of the court. But this river requires constant, meticulous, and back-breaking maintenance. The daily upkeep of your hair is not a quick 5-minute routine with a brush. It is a lengthy, ritualized process that can take hours and requires the dedicated assistance of at least one, and preferably several, ladies-in-waiting. The day begins with combing. You would be seated on a cushion while your attendant carefully, painstakingly, begins to comb your hair. This is not a task to be rushed. The primary tool, as we've seen, is a large, sturdy boxwood comb with wide teeth. The attendant starts at the very ends of the hair, which are lying in a pool on the floor, and gently works out any tangles from the previous day. She works her way up, inch by painful inch, holding the hair firmly above the section she is combing to avoid pulling on your scalp. A single, sudden tug could cause breakage, and every single strand was precious. This process could easily take an hour or more, depending on the length and thickness of your hair. As the main tangles are removed, the attendant switches to a series of combs with progressively finer teeth, smoothing the hair until it lies in a perfectly straight, glossy sheet. The sound of the comb moving rhythmically through the long tresses was a familiar, domestic sound in the women's quarters of a Heian estate. To aid in this process and to give the hair its desired lustrous sheen, various hair oils and treatments were used. A popular treatment was usuru, a liquid made from rinsing rice. The starchy water was believed to strengthen the hair and make it more pliable. Camellia oil was also a favorite, used sparingly to add gloss and a delicate fragrance. The attendant would apply a small amount of oil to the comb and distribute it evenly through the hair as she worked. One of the lesser known, and rather laborious, aspects of this daily routine was airing the hair. Because the hair was so long and thick, it could easily trap moisture and odors. To combat this, you would have to spend a portion of your day with your hair spread out as widely as possible, often draped over a screen or a low table, to allow air to circulate through it. This was especially critical after a bath or on a humid day. You would have to sit, still and patient, while your hair had its daily breathing time. When it came to styling, the options were limited by the sheer length and weight of the hair. The primary style for a noble woman was to simply wear it down, straightened unbound, flowing freely down her back. This was the ultimate expression of its beauty. For certain formal occasions, the hair might be tied back loosely at the nape of the neck with a decorative paper or silk cord called a moto yui, but elaborate tuptos or braids were generally impossible. The hair was simply too long and heavy to be piled on top of the head. This created a constant physical awareness of your hair. When you walked, you had to be conscious of the heavy curtain trailing behind you. When you sat, you had to arrange it carefully around you. The reliance on your attendants was absolute. You could not possibly manage this hair on your own. Your ladies-in-waiting were not just companions, they were your essential hair technicians. Their skill in combing, oiling, and managing your hair was a crucial part of your daily existence. A clumsy attendant who pulled too hard or caused a snag would be a source of major frustration. The historical debate here often focuses on the relationship between the noble woman and her attendants. Was this a relationship of pure servitude, or was it one of deep intimacy and codependent? The act of hair combing was an incredibly intimate one. Your attendant was one of the few people who would see you in a state of relative undress, who would touch you and care for you in such a personal way. This daily ritual would have forged powerful bonds of trust and familiarity. The lives of the mistress and her attendants were inextricably and literally entangled. So use it for what feels like an eternity as the comb moves slowly, methodically through the long, heavy mass of your hair. It is a quiet, meditative time, but also a tedious one. It is a symbol of your luxury. You have the leisure to sit for hours and the staff to perform this service for you, but it is also a symbol of your dependence. You are physically tethered to your own beauty, and you are reliant on the hands of others to maintain it. This slow, rhythmic scraping of the comb is the soundtrack to your gilded, beautiful, and deeply constrained life. The daily combing is a tedious but manageable ritual, the true ordeal. The event that required the planning of a minor military campaign was washing your hair with hair that could be over 7 meters long. This was not a simple task. It was an infrequent, all-day affair, undertaken perhaps only a few times a year, or even less. The days leading up to a hair washing were filled with a sense of dread and anticipation. The process began with the assembly of an enormous amount of water, which all had to be heated over a fire and carried in buckets to your chambers. You would need a large wooden tub, not for you to get into, but for your hair. You would kneel or sit on a low stool beside the tub, and your attendants would carefully lower your massive tresses into the warm water. It would take a long time for the hair to become fully saturated, and the sheer weight of it when wet was immense. The shampoo of the day was a substance called fan ori, a type of glue made from boiling seaweed. It had cleansing properties and was thought to be nourishing for the hair. Another option was the previously mentioned usuru, the starchy water from rinsing rice. Your attendants would work the cleansing agent through your hair, section by section. It was a massive undertaking, requiring several pairs of hands to ensure every part of the hair was cleaned without creating a hopelessly tangled mess. Rinsing was an even greater challenge, requiring countless buckets of fresh, Warm water to be poured through the hair until all the residue was gone. Once the washing and rinsing were complete, the most difficult part of the entire process began: drying. There were no blow dryers. You couldn't just wrap it in a towel. The only method was slow, painstaking air drying. Your attendants would gently squeeze out as much excess water as possible with soft cloths. Then, you would have to spend the rest of the day, and possibly part of the next, sitting very still while your hair was spread out to dry. The wet hair would be carefully draped over screens, low tables, or specially constructed drying racks. To speed up the process, attendants would stand by with large fans, manually fanning the hair for hours on end. In colder months, a heated brazier might be placed nearby at a safe distance, of course to provide warm air. You were essentially immobilized, a prisoner of your own wet hair. For the better part of a day or more, you couldn't attend to any duties, receive visitors, or do much of anything except sit and wait. A particularly unpleasant but very real aspect of this process was the smell. As the thick mass of hair slowly dried, it could sometimes develop a damp, musty odor. This is where the perfuming process became critical. As the hair was drying, incense would be burned nearby, allowing the fragrant smoke to permeate the strands and cover up any unpleasant smells, infusing it instead with a signature scent of aloes wood and spices. Given how incredibly laborious and time-consuming this was, it's easy to see why hair washing was such a rare event. It was a major disruption to the life of the entire household. For this reason, daily maintenance and dry cleaning techniques were crucial. Attendants would oft unclean the hair by combing it with powdered rice bran, which would absorb excess oil and dirt, and could then be brushed out. It wasn't as effective as a full wash, but it was a necessary compromise to avoid the dreaded all-day washing ordeal. The historical discussion around this topic often questions the reality versus the ideal. The literature is filled with descriptions of perfectly clean, fragrant, glossy black hair. But was this always the case? Some historians suggest that the reality for many noble women was likely hair that was often oily, dusty, and probably carried a complex aroma that was a mixture of fine perfume and, well, unwashed hair. The ideal presented in the poetry and diaries was an aspiration, a vision of perfection that the grim reality of a 7-meter-long head of hair made almost impossible to achieve on a consistent basis. So you sit there, surrounded by your team of fanning attendants. The air is cool on your scalp, and the floor around you is a damp, dark sea of your own hair. The process is boring, uncomfortable, and seemingly endless. This is the hidden price of your greatest asset. For every poem written about the glorious, flowing river of your hair, there is this unseen reality: a day of shivering, tedious, and smelly servitude to that very same river. Your hair is finally dry. After the day-long ordeal of washing and fanning, it once again flows down your back in a glossy, fragrant, and impossibly long sheet. But the end of the washing ritual does not bring freedom. It only returns you to the daily, moment-to-moment reality of living with your hair, which is, in its own way, just as confining. Your hair is not just an accessory, it is a permanent, physical extension of yourself that dictates your every move. It is your gilded cage. Imagine the simple act of getting up from a seated position. You can't just stand up. First, you must carefully gather the meters of hair that have pooled around you on the floor. You must sweep it over one shoulder, like a heavy, silken cloak, ensuring that none of it is trapped underneath you. Every time you turn, you must be conscious of the long train behind you, lest you catch it on the corner of a screen or a piece of furniture. It is less a hairstyle and more a permanent, high-maintenance pet that you must constantly manage. The weight itself is a constant presence. High low-grade tension at the back of your scalp is your normal state of being. Sudden movements can send a shocking, painful tug through your roots. You learn to move with a slow, deliberate grace, not just because it is considered elegant, but because it is a physical necessity. Your hair is a silken anchor, keeping you grounded in a life of stillness. Daily life is filled with small, invisible hazards. The open braziers used for warmth and for heating incense are a constant source of anxiety. A stray spark, a careless turn, and your greatest beauty could become a terrifying, fast-moving fire. Eating is a logistical nightmare. You must lean forward carefully, while an attendant stands ready to hold your hair back to prevent it from dipping into your soup or rice. You are perpetually dependent on others for the most basic actions. This leads us to a strange and poignant detail concerning the end of a noble woman's life. What happened to this magnificent hair, this life's work? After she passed away, it was considered so integral to her identity, such a powerful symbol of her spirit, that it was often treated with special reverence. In some cases, the hair was cut from the deceased's head and placed in a special box, to be kept as a sacred memento by the family. There are even accounts of the hair being enshrined at a temple. And even more fascinating, though less common, practice was the creation of a kami-oke, or hair coffin. The hair would be cut and coiled inside a beautiful lacquered box, which was then interred with the body. It was as if the hair itself had its own identity, its own soul, that needed to be laid to rest with the same dignity as the woman who grew it. The most mundane aspects of life were complicated by your hair. Sleep, as we've discussed, was a stiff, formal affair on a hard pillow to protect your hairstyle, but the sheer length added another layer of complexity. You had to learn to sleep without rolling over and tangling yourself in a web of your own hair, which could be both uncomfortable and dangerous, potentially wrapping around your neck. The freedom of unconsciousness was denied to you even in sleep. You had to be mindful of your beauty. Historians continue to debate the core nature of this aesthetic choice. Was this a genuine expression of female pride, a feature cultivated and celebrated within the female-centric world of the court's inner quarters, or was it the ultimate symbol of female oppression, a weaponized leisure that proved a woman's family was so wealthy that she could afford to be beautifully completely incapacitated? The fact that the hair physically restricted women, making them sedentary and dependent, served the patriarchal structure that preferred its high-ranking women to be stationary symbols of family status. Yet, the literature written by women of the period, like Asi, Ashona Jio, and Murasaki Shikibu, speaks of long hair with what appears to be genuine admiration and aesthetic appreciation. It was their own standard of beauty, a source of intense competition and pride among themselves. So you live within this cage of your own making. It is a source of immense pride and countless compliments. Poets will praise it, men will be enchanted by it, other women will envy it. It is the core of your physical identity, but it is also your tether. It keeps you still. It makes you dependent. It limits your world to a series of slow, careful movements within the confines of your shadowy chambers. It is a crown that is also a set of chains, a symbol of your glory that ensures you can never, ever be free. You have done it. You have endured every step of the painstaking process. Now, let's take a final look at the finished product. An attendant holds up the polished bronze mirror, its surface wavy and dim, reflecting a distorted, golden-hued image. But even in this imperfect reflection, the transformation is absolute. The person staring back at you is a stranger, a beautiful, serene, and utterly artificial stranger. Let's assemble the pieces, one last time, to see the full effect. The foundation is the face of perfect, the opaque white oval, created with the toxic lead-based powder. It has no blemishes, no color, no hint of the living, breathing skin beneath. It is a mask of serene emptiness. Floating high on the forehead, like 2 melancholic clouds, are the smudgy moth-like eyebrows, painted on with charcoal where no eyebrows should be. They give the face a look of permanent, gentle surprise, a stylized expression of aristocratic ennui. When your lips part in a slight, controlled smile, there is no flash of white, but a glimpse of a sophisticated, jet black lacquer. The Ohaguro has turned your smile into a dark, mysterious accent, a mark of your maturity and married status that disappears into the shadows of your mouth. Your face is a triptych of artificial, the white skin, the high-drawn brows, the black teeth. It is a face designed not for communication, but for contemplation. It is the face of a living doll. This doll-like head is set upon a body that has also been deconstructed and reassembled by fashion. You are swaddled in up to 20 kilograms of silk, the Junihito, which forms its own architectural shape. Your own figure is irrelevant, hidden beneath a cascade of perfectly coordinated colors that speak of the season and your impeccable taste. You are a walking textile sculpture, a human form turned into a canvas for the display of wealth and aesthetic sensibility. The weight of the robes forces you into a slow, gliding gait, the very picture of noble grace and cultivated helplessness. Your scent precedes you and lingers after you've gone. It's not the simple scent of soap or flowers, but a complex, heavy, and smoky perfume of rare woods and spices that has been infused into every layer of your clothing. It is your invisible signature, a statement of your identity, as powerful as any visual cue. And finally, there is the hair, the one natural element, allowed to grow to an unnatural length. It flows from your head in a vast, dark river pooling on the floor around you. It is a symbol of your life force, your sensuality, and your aristocratic bloodline. It is your crowning glory and your heaviest burden, a magnificent, living tether that keeps you rooted in a life of beautiful stillness. This complete package, the face, the clothes, the scent, the hair, creates a creature that is barely recognizable as human in the way we understand it. You have become an icon, a symbol. Every single element of your appearance has been carefully curated to project a specific set of ideals: wealth, leisure, refinement, emotional restraint, and a mysterious, otherworldly beauty. You have successfully erased almost every trace of your natural, individual self and replaced it with a shared, collective ideal of what a noble woman should be. One strange, overarching effect of this total transformation was its impact on age. The heavy white makeup concealed wrinkles and age spots, while the black teeth hid any decay or discoloration that came with age. The shaved eyebrows remained the same from age 14 to 64. In a way, this aesthetic made women appear strangely ageless. A young woman was made to look more mature and formal, while an older woman was preserved in this unchanging mask of beauty. They created a kind of suspended animation, where all women of the court, regardless of their actual age, subscribed to a single, timeless and rather ghostly ideal. Historians often use the term performative to describe this existence. You are performing the role of Heian noblewoman every waking moment of your day. It's a performance that requires immense discipline, patience, and a high tolerance for discomfort. There is no off-duty. The mask is never fully removed. The question that remains, and that scholars still debate, is what happened to the person underneath. Did the inner self atrophy from lack of expression, or did it develop a rich, hidden life, a world of thoughts and feelings kept secret behind the perfect facade? The great literary works of the period, written by women, suggest the latter. Behind the mask, there was a universe of keen observation, sharp wit, and deep emotion. You lower the mirror. The strange, beautiful doll looks back at you. This is you now. This is your reality. You are a masterpiece of the Heian aesthetic. You are admired. You are envied. And you are trapped. You are a perfect, beautiful, and utterly exhausted work of art. You are a perfect, silent doll. Your face is a mask, incapable of showing the broad emotions of joy, anger, or surprise. Your body is swaddled in layers of silk, preventing any expressive gestures. So how do you communicate? How do you flirt, show disdain, express curiosity, or signal embarrassment in a world that has stripped you of your primary tools of expression? You use a fan. In the Heian court, the folding fan, or hyoji, the hyoji, was not just a tool for creating a gentle breeze, it was an essential extension of the self, a sophisticated device for nonverbal communication, and a canvas for showcasing one's artistic taste. Every noblewoman and every nobleman carried one at all times. To be seen without your fan would be like being seen without a crucial piece of your clothing. You would feel naked and vulnerable. Your fan is a thing of beauty in itself. It's made of thin slats of cypress wood, held together at the base by a rivet end laced with colorful silk cords. The faces of the fan are covered in heavy paper, which is then exquisitely painted, often by you or a talented artisan in your service. The paintings might depict scenes from famous poems, delicate floral motifs appropriate to the season, or abstract patterns. The quality of your fan, the painting, the craftsmanship of the wood, the color of the cords was another subtle but important indicator of your status and refinement. But its true function was as a communication device. Behind your fan, you could hide your face when you felt a blush of shame or the urge to smile too broadly. A quick snap of the fan being opened could signal impatience or attract attention. A slow, graceful wave might indicate approval or beckon someone closer. The way you held it, the speed at which you moved it, the angle at which you covered your face, all of these were part of a complex, unspoken language that everyone at court understood implicitly. Imagine a scene. A suitor is speaking to you from the other side of your bamboo blind. He has just recited a rather clumsy poem. Instead of sighing or rolling your eyes, you might simply lower your fan slowly, revealing your impassive, powdered face for a brief moment before raising it again. The message is clear: I am unimpressed. Conversely, if he recites a brilliant verse, you might tap your fan lightly against your hand, a gesture of delight and appreciation that is both subtle and encouraging. The fan was also an essential tool for managing the awkwardness of the era's social restrictions. When speaking, it was considered proper to hold your fan up to cover your mouth. This was partly out of modesty, but it also served the practical purpose of hiding your blackened teeth from constant view, preserving the mystery of your smile for more intimate moments. When you felt a sudden, unladylike emotion, a fit of giggles, a surge of irritation, you could quickly raise your fan to conceal the inappropriate expression until you regained your composure. It was your personal, emotional curtain. A particularly charming and little-known use of the fan was as a message board. A woman might write a quick, impromptu response to a poem on the slats of her fan and then pass it through the screen to her suitor. It was the Heian equivalent of sending a text message, a spontaneous and intimate form of communication. Lovers would also exchange fans as tokens of their affection. To possess someone's fan was to hold a deeply personal object that had touched their hands and been privy to their most private thoughts and expressions. This fan language is a topic of great interest to cultural historians, though it is incredibly difficult to reconstruct with certainty. The meanings were not written down in a manual. They were learned through observation and social immersion. The nuances are lost to time, and scholars still debate the precise meaning of certain gestures described in historical texts. Was a fan held upside down a sign of anger, or simply a casual affectation? We can only guess based on the context provided in the stories. It was a fluid, living language that died with the society that created it. So use it behind your screen. Your face a perfect mask, but you are not mute. In your hand, you hold your voice. Your fan flutters, snaps, and glides, a butterfly of painted paper and wood that speaks volumes without ever uttering a sound. It allows you to navigate the rigid social landscape with grace and subtlety, to express a universe of feeling from behind your impassive facade. It is your shield, your mouthpiece, and your most trusted confidant. In a world designed to silence and conceal you, your fan gives you a way to be heard. Years pass. The seasons turn in Heian, each one marked by the changing colors of your robes and the motifs on your fan. You have lived your life as a perfect icon of beauty. You have been admired. You have borne children. You have managed your household from behind your screens. but the choices you made in your youth, the daily rituals you performed in front of that bronze mirror, have been exacting a slow, invisible toll. The poison has had decades to do its work. The first place the damage becomes undeniable is your skin. For years, the thick, white Oshiro eye has masked the creeping destruction. But now, in the privacy of your chambers, when the mask is reluctantly removed for a rare, thorough cleaning, the face beneath is a wreck. The lead has caused permanent discoloration, leaving your skin a mottled, grayish yellow. It is covered in rough patches, sores that refuse to heal, and the deep, premature wrinkles caused by chronic dryness and cellular damage. The irony is brutal. The quest for a perfect complexion has resulted in its complete and utter ruin. But the cosmetic damage is the least of your worries. The lead, which has been steadily accumulating in your bones and organs, now asserts its power more forcefully. The vague aches and pains of your middle years have blossomed into chronic, debilitating arthritis. Your joints are stiff and swollen, making even the slow, gliding movements required by your station a painful effort. You suffer from constant, agonizing abdominal pain and digestive issues. The Senki, that has been your unwelcome companion for decades, is now a constant tormentor. Your mind, once celebrated for its wit and poetic sensibility, is clouding over. The neurological effects of long-term lead poisoning are setting in. You find it difficult to concentrate. Your memory, once sharp enough to recall hundreds of poems, now fails you. You search for words that used to come easily. You might experience tremors in your hands, making the delicate art of calligraphy a frustrating struggle. In the most severe cases, this cognitive decline could lead to full-blown dementia, a tragic fading of the brilliant mind that was so prized in your culture. You are slowly being erased, not by makeup, but from the inside out. The beautiful, doll-like creature is decaying. It's a quiet, private tragedy, hidden from the court behind the same screens and masks that have always defined your existence. Your attendants help you apply the white paste over your damaged skin, paint the moth-like brows on your trembling forehead, and dress you in the heavy silks that hide your aching, frail body. The performance must continue, even as the performer is falling apart. One of the most tragic and rarely discussed consequences of this slow poisoning was its effect on the aristocratic class as a whole. The high rates of infertility, miscarriages, and infant mortality, all linked to lead poisoning, had a real demographic impact. Noble families struggled to produce healthy heirs. This is a point of serious academic study. To what extent did these self-inflicted beauty standards contribute to the eventual decline of the Heian aristocracy's power? While political and economic factors were certainly more significant, some historians argue that this widespread, chronic health crisis weakened the ruling class from within, making them more vulnerable to the rising power of the provincial warrior clans. They were literally poisoning their own lineage in the name of preserving its aesthetic purity. And what of your smile, the Ohaguro, which protected your teeth from decay for so long, might now present its own set of problems. While your teeth may be cavity-free, the constant application of a corrosive, acidic substance may have taken a toll on your gums, leading to recession and chronic inflammation. Your once prized black smile might now be a source of constant oral discomfort. You sit in your chamber, a revered elder, a matriarch of your clan. You are still beautiful on the surface, a perfect, unchanging icon, but underneath the white paint and perfumed silk, you are in constant pain. Your body is a prison of ailments, and your mind is a fading shadow. This is the final, cruel punchline of the Heian beauty ideal. The pursuit of a timeless, artificial beauty ultimately accelerates the one thing it seeks to deny: decay. The mask that was supposed to grant you a kind of immortality has, in fact, been the instrument of your slow, painful, and very mortal demise. The world outside your silk-screened existence is changing. The refined, insular, and aesthetic-obsessed culture of the Heian court which has seemed so permanent, is beginning to crumble. The slow decline you feel in your own body is mirrored in the society around you. The impossible standards of beauty that have defined your entire life are starting to seem less important and even irrelevant in the face of a new and rising power. The late Heian period was marked by increasing political instability. The imperial court, lost in its world of poetry contests and perfume blending, had gradually lost its grip on the provinces. Powerful warrior clans, the Bushikai or samurai, who had been hired by the nobility to manage their provincial estates and provide security, were growing stronger and more assertive. Clans like the Chira and the Minamoto were building their own power bases, far from the capital, and they had little patience for the delicate sensibilities of the courtiers in Heian. These were men of action, not aesthetics. Their values were not based on the ability to compose a clever poem, but on martial prowess, loyalty, and physical strength. They lived a hard, practical life, and their idea of masculine beauty was radically different from the powdered, black-toothed courtier. The samurai ideal was one of ruggedness and readiness. Their faces were weathered by the sun and wind, not whitened with lead powder. Their bodies were honed for battle, not hidden under 20 kilograms of silk. As these warrior clans grew in influence and eventually seized political power, culminating in the establishment of the Kamakura shogunate in 1185, their values began to seep into the culture. The focus shifted from Miyabi courtly elegance to a more stark, militaristic ethos. Simplicity, discipline, and practicality began to replace the elaborate and decadent tastes of the Heian court. And with this cultural shift, the aesthetic of the Heian noblewoman began to fade. The impossibly long hair, the shaved eyebrows, and the 12-layer robes were all symbols of a life of extreme leisure and impracticality. In a world now governed by warriors, where civil war was a constant threat, this kind of elaborate display seemed out of touch and even foolish. While some of the practices lingered for a time, they lost their place at the center of the cultural stage. The Junihaito, for instance, became a purely ceremonial garment, worn only by the imperial family on the most formal of occasions. It was replaced in daily life by the kosodi, a simpler, T-shaped robe that was the precursor to the modern kimono. This new garment allowed for far greater freedom of movement, a practical necessity in a more turbulent age. The practice of shaving the eyebrows and painting on the high-mouthed brows also gradually fell out of fashion. Women began to let their natural eyebrows grow back, though they were still carefully shaped and groomed. The white face powder remained a staple of female beauty for centuries, but the extreme, mask-like application of the Heian era gave way to a slightly more naturalistic, though still very pale look. Interestingly, the one practice that proved most resilient was Ohaguro. The blackening of teeth continued to be practiced by married women of various social classes well into the 19th century. It lost some of its exclusive, aristocratic mystique and became a more general symbol of marital status. It was finally banned by the Japanese government in 1870 as part of a push to modernize and adopt Western standards of beauty. There is a historical debate about how quickly this transition occurred. Did the Heian aesthetic die a sudden death with the rise of the samurai? Or was it a slow, gradual fading over several generations? The evidence suggests the latter. The court in Kyoto continued to exist, even with its power diminished, and it clung to its old traditions for as long as it could. But the cultural energy, the money, and the power were all shifting eastward to the new military capital in Kamakura. The Heian ideal of beauty didn't vanish overnight, it just became a relic. A beautiful but anachronistic ghost haunting the halls of a powerless court. So from behind your screen, in the twilight of your life, you witness the twilight of your world, the values you embodied, the painful rituals you endured to achieve a specific kind of perfection, are losing their meaning. A new Japan is being forged, one with different heroes and a different definition of beauty. The delicate, hothouse flower of Heian court culture is wilting, unable to survive in the harsh winds of this new, more violent era. The end has come, not with a sudden crash, but with a slow, inevitable fading, like a watercolor painting left in the sun. One last time, you ask an attendant to hold up the bronze mirror. You are very old now. The world outside has moved on, filled with the loud, clan-goro sounds of warriors and new loyalties. But in this small, quiet room, the ritual persists, a ghost of a forgotten age. You gaze at your reflection. The white mask is still there, though it takes your attendants longer to apply it now, to cover the deeply damaged skin beneath. The painted brows are perhaps a little less steady, a little more faint. The black smile is the same, a constant darkness in a changing world. You see the icon of a Heian beauty, but you also see, in the dim, wavering light of the lamp, the truth that the mirror cannot fully hide. You see the frail, aching body beneath the silk, the clouded look in the eyes, the spirit weary from a lifetime of performance. You have outlived your own era. The things that were once the currency of your world, a perfectly blended incense, a witty line of poetry, the precise layering of 12 silk robes are now curiosities. The young women of the new ruling samurai class are different. They are more practical. They ride horses. Their beauty is in their vitality, not their exquisite helplessness. You look at the stranger in the mirror and you wonder, was she worth it? Was this perfect, painted creature worth the pain, the poison, the confinement? A fascinating thing has happened to your tools. Your beautiful lacquered cosmetic box, your ornate combs, the small ceramic pots that once held the lead powder and the foul tooth-blackening liquid, they are now seen not as tools, but as art objects. Your grandchildren admire them for the quality of their craftsmanship, for the beauty of their painted designs, the original purpose, the daily, painful reality of what they were used for is beginning to be forgotten. They are becoming heirlooms, their toxic history laundered by time into simple, aesthetic beauty. It is perhaps the most perfect and tragic metaphor for your entire existence. This is the enduring legacy of your time. The Heian period, for all its political weakness and eventual decline, established a classical standard of beauty and art that future generations of Japanese culture would forever react to. They would either try to emulate its grace, or they would consciously rebel against it, creating new aesthetics based on simplicity, wabi-sabi, or martial strength. Your world became the beautiful, flawed blueprint, the cultural ground zero from which so much else would spring. Your life's work, in a way, was to become a museum piece while you were still living. And this brings us to the final, unanswerable question, the one historians will debate for 1,000 years. Looking at this stranger in the mirror, do you feel pride or regret? The writings left behind by the women of your time are filled with both. There is immense pride in their aesthetic achievements, a deep satisfaction in their refined taste and their mastery of the art of living. But there is also a profound sense of sorrow, of confinement, of a life lived at a painful remove from reality. There is no simple answer. The beauty was real, and so was the suffering. They were two sides of the same lacquered coin. The face in the mirror offers no clues. She is as serene and unreadable as she was 70 years ago. She is a perfect mask to the very end. You look at her, this creature you spent a lifetime creating, and you realize you no longer know who the stranger is. Is it the woman underneath, the one you can no longer remember, or is it the mask itself, that beautiful phantom who has finally outlived her purpose? The line between the performer and the role has blurred completely, leaving only a quiet, echoing emptiness. And so, the image in the bronze mirror begins to soften. Let it fade away now. The white face, the dark smile, the heavy silk robes, they dissolve back into the shadows of the past, leaving only a feeling, a gentle impression behind. The story is over. The striving, the pain, the pursuit of that impossible, cruel beauty, they can all be released now. Let it drift away on the scent of sandalwood and aloes, what that still seems to hang in the air. You can hear the gentle sound of rain beginning to fall outside the paper screens, a soft, rhythmic patter on the cypress bark roof. It's a sound that has been heard in this quiet, wooden city for 1,000 years. It is a sound of peace, of washing away. There are no more rituals to perform, no more masks to apply. There is only the quiet of the room, the soft glow of a distant lantern, and the gentle rhythm of the rain. Feel the weight of the story lift from your shoulders, leaving you light and calm. You are drifting now, floating in the warm, quiet darkness between wake of cells and sleep. The world of Heian has melted into a dream, and you are drifting with it, down a slow, quiet river, toward a deepened, peaceful rest. There is only quiet now, soft and quiet,